That was such a profound question too, Etienne.
From 7 CTOs, my name is Etienne De Bruin, and you're in the CTO studio. If we think about our influence in our networks externally, we have this thing happening internally where we are influential, we have authority, we have the mandate of being the officer or the executive that needs to lead people. And I wonder if we have a similar but different issues manifesting, but the same root cause, which is maybe a misunderstanding of the power that we carry. But internally, we may be thinking, I am simply collaborating with my team leads on what if we went from this framework to that framework? And in your mind, you think I'm just suggesting something. You're unaware of the influence you have. So what your team is hearing is something completely different. And then you're lamenting as a leader, well, why can't I just collaborate or why can't I just brainstorm and share? And I see this with C levels or with high ups that they don't often understand the influence that they have or the sway that they have.
Yeah, you're right there, Etienne. That's a huge pitfall. Internally, when we're talking about our teams, we have more than influence over them. We have hard power. Like we have authority. We can tell, person X to do Y, right? But we also have influence. And I think that that's what you were getting at. Sometimes we think we're exerting influence, but really we're exerting hard power and we just don't notice it. So, in a context where you don't have hard power, like the public at large, you can only exert influence, right? And you can do that any way you want to. You can do it by doing a thing or suggesting a thing or talking about a thing. In a team, I think that you can only exert influence by showing because there's a huge likelihood, like you mentioned, that if you suggest something to someone, they're going to take it as a command or an order, even if you say this isn't really an order, right? So when you're not commanding and you're acting as an example to other people, that's when you're exerting influence in your organization.
It's probably a really good barometer, external versus internal, in that of a good barometer to detect how good we are at influence. I know many people that are, let's say, more command and control about how they go about leading. And then they try to step out into social media, try to write blog posts, and they're like, well, no one ever interacts with me. And it's what it is it's a good barometer of their ability or inability to influence others, because as Scott said, you can only influence in those public settings. You can't really control. I also think that there's this piece internally around how we like you said, Etienne, we don't think of it as influence. We don't think of it, we just think of it, we're just collaborating with other people. But in reality, all of that work is it's the same mentality that you would use publicly. You're just using it internally, right? And there are some people that struggle to get their ideas heard and their ideas, out there, even internally within the world. And that uh, often when I deconstruct that with them, I find that they're trying to exert control to get their idea to happen rather than exerting influence.
Mm.
And they don't know the skill of how to exert influence.
I think that if I were to pull kind of the themes I'm hearing from this conversation apart, one is really being intentional with yourself and really noting, hey, what is my intention here? Is it to have influence? And so who am I being such that I'm actually creating influence? And just noting, oh, wow, I might relate to this as just collaborating with my team, but it is creating influence. Do I know what that influence is? And am I actually connected to that for myself and for my team? The other thing I hear is one of my favorite, I guess, methodologies of leadership is modeling, not telling how you want someone to do it, but really modeling it. And I think that is partly what we're saying, that two key aspects of influence are intention and model.
From the modeling perspective that you're talking about there, I do a lot of thinking about that. A lot of people ask me, how is it that you're so able to influence within the organization? And it's because I'm constantly socializing ideas. And really, I talk to the people who are struggling about why socializing ideas is important. We might not pitch an idea until after we've socialized it with everyone to understand their feedback, what's important to them. And it's really coming from that listening. Let me know what you think about this. How does this idea land with you? What do you think instead? That role modeling is so important that we have to be doing that every day if we want other people to build these skills as well.
Yeah, I'm really in love with this idea of control versus influence thinking. That if I can't control the outcome, which again is it's what engineering is about, right? Control the outcome, control the system. Good engineering is doing that at sort of the leanest possible way, shortest path between A and B, where influence is sort of this spaghetti soup, otherwise known as ramen.
Yeah. Um, I used to think that influence was really complicated, but I don't think it's complicated anymore. Influence is, in my view, just being helpful. It boils down to just being helpful. Because if you think of who is the most influential person that you can think of in some area, right? That's probably a person who's also helped the most people with their ideas, right? And if someone picks up the idea and finds it useful, you have helped them. You can also build influence by helping people in more direct ways, like literally, Etienne, can I help you with my problem, with your problem? And if I do help you and you feel like I contributed, then that's also influence. It's changed the way that you viewed me. If you found my idea useful today, you're more likely to find my idea useful tomorrow. So it's been by thinking about influence as trying to help as many people as possible that I've gotten over sort of the bad flavor of
Mm.
influence as control and trying to like take away people's autonomy.
Yeah, I really love that. I think just distilling it down to how can I help, and that surfaces such an important view of self, right? Can I be helpful? Am I valuable enough to help? It's just really addresses all those images we have of self. That if we can overcome that, I'm happy to help.
What's beautiful about that is it brings the empathy. I think we can't really influence effectively unless we have empathy for the people that are part of the thing we're trying to influence. And so if we're coming from that empathy, we care that their input is part of it. We care that the solution actually is successful for them. It supports them, and it just opens so many doors to come from that perspective of how can I help? It's beautiful.
Yeah, and with that framework, which I really appreciate, it also, we kind of started talking about this under the guise that, hey, there's a myth to influence. There's a way we think about it that may not actually be how it is. And I think what you just spoke to, Kathy, is it takes away some of the bigness of influence to say, hey, it's not about going out influencing all these people all the time just to the masses. It's actually one by one, really connecting with someone such that they really feel seen and heard, and that's gonna be the thing that has you have the most influence, and it's just about that person, that time, and really just connecting one on one.
Yeah.
One of the things I think a lot about is this idea of like when I write a blog post or something or a LinkedIn article, it's not about me sharing the content. It's about me thinking, who needs to know this? Right? And so that's that piece of helping to flip the thing on its head to say it is about helping other people gain the knowledge that they need to grow their careers or to better support them in their roles.
Yeah, I can't talk about influence or think about being helpful without invoking the paragon of influencers. To me, this person exemplifies influence. And his name was Paul Airdos. And this man was the most influential mathematician of the 20th century. And he was like his influence was so ubiquitous that mathematicians invented the concept called the Airdos number, which is the number of citations away from Paul Airdos you were, right? So, for example, if I collaborated on a paper with Etienne and Etienne collaborated on a paper with Airdos, then my Airdos number would be 2, right? Like the most coveted number was 1, that you actually worked on a paper with this man or was cited on a paper with this man. And of course, we've made that idea a little bit more fun because we've turned it into the idea of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Who was also very influential, really. So the way that Erdos exerted influence or practice influence was like I seek to model that. And the man was he was homeless and he had no possessions. And his entire life was focused around going to conferences and staying with friends who are mathematicians and helping them, right? He would come to their house and whatever they were working on, he would help them with. And that's why he was cited on so many papers. He was like an infinite well of always being helpful, always wherever he went being additive. And because of that, he was the most influential mathematician of the 20th century. I think if he had sat in his study and worked on ideas by himself, even if they were great, right? Like even if he was kind of like an Euler and was just like constantly emitting like world-changing mathematics, he would not have been as influential, right? Because his influence came from the relationships that he created with the people that he helped. And that in a nutshell is my view of like what it means to be influential.
And that speaks to the idea that when you're helping others, there's an audience of people that are observing you helping others. And I think that is that beautiful unintended consequence. If someone views the authenticity, the determination, we just have this effect on people if they see us helping people. So if you're volunteering to man the support line for the weekend as the CTO, well, there's a whole team that's seeing you do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly it. And like we were talking about the difference between power and influence, you cannot be influential by exerting power. They're mutually exclusive. So it is only by, like you said, being helpful in front of an audience. Maybe that's the best definition of influence you could possibly have, is being helpful in front of an audience.
It's like, I'm only
Because,
going to help you. I'm only going to help you if you can provide me with an audience.
well, not necessarily that, right? All I'm saying is that when you're helping people and no one knows about it, your influence is limited, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, when you help
You're
people,
influencing that one person, right? You're
yeah,
influencing that one person.
So how have you seen in roles of CTO and leadership where influence has helped you?
Well, oftentimes as a CTO, we have to a- achieve our goals requires us to be working with all parts of the organization. And while we have control over our part of the organization, we don't over the others. They're our peers, right? And yet to achieve our goals, we have to ensure that they do their part of what they need to do, that they're ready and willing when the code comes out, that they're ready to market it and all that. And that this coordination across all of us is where I think influence comes in the most from a CTO's perspective, is that ability to say, is everyone going to be in the right place at the right time to make this orchestration of this work happen? And in order to do that, we have to ensure that all those people have the information that they need, that their needs have been taken care of in the issue, that they're ready, that they have the information that they need, and that we're all working together in harmony. And that's where I think that's where, at least for me, influence comes in the most.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Kathy. You have to use influence anywhere you can't use power. As I always talk about, that the CTO sits inside of a value chain, and upstream of the CTO, we have the product apparatus, and then downstream we have a sales and marketing apparatus. Well, you can be the finest CTO in the world and do your job perfectly, build the best team, flawless technology, and the company fails because you're dependent on the other people in the value chain to be successful. You can't do it
Mm,
by yourself. So that means as a CTO, if you can't exert influence on product and influence on sales and marketing, and even influence on your boss, the CEO, you have a much greater chance of being successful in your company.
So funny how just no matter what our topic is, it just keeps coming back to relationships. And that's what I really hear influence is really about, right? And I think maybe this is where there's some disempowering relationships to influence is that if you're not in relationship and you try to exert influence, that's likely where it comes off as control. But if you are very much in relationship with someone and you are exerting influence, it occurs and it lands like collaboration, support, leadership, etc. And so it really feels like part of the runway for CTOs or directors or VPs, people who are really starting to work with people, is building the skill of relationship actually is the skill of influence, is what I'm hearing.
The work piece of a CTO is not the software. The work piece of the CTO is the organization. So it's sort of like s- I hate to reduce products to side effects, but it's kind of a side effect of creating a great organization to have a great product, right? So yeah, it's all about relationships. Being helpful is essentially identical to being influential. And if you help your peers and partners in your job, then they're going to help you. They'll be amenable to your suggestions.
when we talk about relationship, I think this is a really important discussion about this developing a skill, the skill of relationship, because many engineers are building the skill of coding up till about like a senior or a staff level engineer. I mean, they're really working on the skills of coding. How does my code work with there? How do I produce quality? And all of a sudden, you hit to staff level engineer, and all of a sudden, all the skills change. It becomes about influence. It becomes about relationship. It becomes about being able to work with others to get to agreement, collaborate with others to get to an agreement on something, which is all influence, right? And all of a sudden, there's entirely new skill to build, and that's staff engineer. I mean, how many CTOs? That's not too many steps away from a CTO, right? And so now you're spending the second half of your technology career, so to speak, building the skill of relationship building, which is new to many people. I see a lot of staff engineers not really struggle with not being able to realize that's the next gap they need to step over. By the time you get to CTO, you have to be experts at it, right?
And that's a jarring transition, a very jarring transition. But it can be easier if you realize that all of your experience and all of the pain and all of the trauma and drama that you went through as an engineer is the well of empathy that you draw on to exert influence as a leader. Let me give you an example. One thing that drives me crazy as a leader of software development teams is when people start slacking on unit tests. I'll be honest with you, it drives me up the wall. When the unit test coverage starts dropping and things are looking bad and people are just sloppy with it, I get a little upset about it, right? So, one way I could react to that is call the development director in my office and say, look, man, we need to get 65 to 80% coverage. We're releasing too many defects, complaint, whatever, right? So that's one way to handle it. That's a direct use of power in your organization. But another way to handle it is to look back on your life as a software developer and think about what prompted you to be so crazy about unit tests. And that is defects slipping through. You're there at 8 or 9 o'clock at night trying to find the bug because the unit test won't find the bug for you. And you eventually come to the realization that, like, actually, I'm doing these unit tests for myself. So maybe another way to address your development director is to say, hey, buddy, I see it in here at 9 o'clock at night trying to track down these defects. And I see in you like a young Scott Graves going through the same struggles. And what worked for me was getting that unit test coverage up. It feels like a pain when you're doing it. And I know there's like not enough hours in the day, but like that was a big breakthrough for me when I was sitting in your chair, is that it always pays back if you keep up with those things, right? And then you can walk away from that. They may take that as a direct order, but they're less likely to take that as a direct order, right? If you couch it in terms of, I really don't like to see you in here at 9 o'clock when you'd rather be at home, right? So it's now sharing an experience instead of giving a command.
Someone's listening to this wondering, how can I be more influential? How can I improve this side of my daily life? I love the idea of, well, look for opportunities to help, look for opportunities to build relationship. I love those. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you to know, how to improve your influence?
Well, I think it really comes down to practice. You can't do one and done. Oh, I tried that. It didn't work for me. Like I've heard that many times before. It's like, it's all practice. If I write a LinkedIn article and 2 people respond, well, work to create a LinkedIn article that 10 people respond to. It's all practice. And what's interesting about that process is the more people you influence, the more they follow you, right? The more they care what you say, because influence is building trust, right? To some degree. They like what you've helped them, right? And because you've helped them, you've built trust with them, the relationship gets stronger. They're gonna now listen to you more, they're gonna share it with their friends, they're gonna tell other people on the team. And so it's like practice helps us build that. And what the outcome was is really just a data point along the way. Like it's just a data point that you can use to refine the process.
And we've talked on this call about thinking about influence is the act of helping people. And you can influence one person by helping one person. You can influence a lot of people by helping a lot of people. So the task of expanding your influence can be recast as, how do I find the people that I can help? Right. And now, at the interest of sounding like a shill, Mr. DeBruyne, I think that a great way to find people to help is to join a professional organization, right? Like 7 CTOs, like going out and, joining like an agile community. If agile is your thing, there are all kinds of people in there who need your help, right? And if you feel like you're shy and you don't want to go join a professional organization, maybe you don't want to commit to that, you can go out and search on LinkedIn for any topic that you're an expert on. And you will find people in threads asking questions. Chime in there and help them. They'll remember you. They may link to you. So the more people you can find to help, then the greater your influence is going to be.
And you brought up a really important point there, in that there's many different ways that this can play out. I remember the first time after I decided I needed to go out into the world and engage, I volunteered for a hackathon, to mentor a hackathon. And it's just like, get out there, just pick something. If it doesn't work, pick something else that feels more comfortable or feels like you're helping more people or whatever. But there's just so many different ways.
And
So,
I think the furnace in which that influence gets created is the one where you aren't getting the instant feedback. You aren't getting. It might not be the easiest environment in which to make an unpopular decision. I feel like it's in sort of that adversity that the influence experience points increases exponentially.
Well, when we
So
do hard things,
yeah,
that's when we grow, right?
especially when other people watch us do hard things.
That's right. And
True.
yeah, and I would like to give a tip about how you can overcome imposter syndrome and this idea that, oh, why should I put my ideas out there? Like, who am I to be influencing or helping people who probably know better than I am? There are influencers on YouTube whose area of influence is Magic the Gathering cards, Pez dispenser collections, Roman coins, right? There is no area of knowledge too esoteric or narrow that it does not need an influencer. So no matter who you are, there's something that you know better than anybody else, just because of your proclivities, your interests, whatever. That's what you should be an influencer in. So don't be too hard on yourself or too reluctant to share what you know.
Yeah. And just to end on this note, because it really ties in a podcast we recorded a few weeks ago, is that we've never heard from you on this subject. So even if so many people have written about something, you sharing is actually different and unique and powerful. So even if you can't find that esoteric or tiny corner of the, universe that no one else has spoken to, you speaking about the ones that everyone's speaking to is interesting. So thank you both for actually demonstrating that this evening, right? Coming and talking and sharing about influence and what your experience has been. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of CTO Studio. This is a little taste of the many conversations we have inside 7 CTOs. In addition to our peer groups, 7 CTOs members are also part of Slack, where ad hoc issues can be addressed by the larger collective. We also have 1 to 2 Zoom calls a week, where we go deep on specific challenges like brand new technologies, hiring strategies, people management, and expanding our influence and branding as technology leaders. Also check out 7ctos.com, where we publish our list of events like upcoming retreats and colloquiums in a city near you. Applications are always open, so mention CTO Studio when you apply and you'll get a free strategy session with me. Wouldn't that be fun? See you next week.